Hey, it's been a bit, but welcome to the ins and outs of DMing. This is a series I've had in my mind for a long time, and considering that my previous video was, I've had a lot of time thinking about video ideas, and I've wanted to make something like this for a while now, and I thought,
Yeah,
well, fuck it, let's start. More or less, I want to create a comprehensive guide of how to be a dungeon master, game master, marshal, fucking fate master, whatever you want to call yourself. It doesn't matter, all are included here. This is a guide for all of you sick fucks who think this is a good idea. I'm one of them included. The series right now should be about 16 episodes if everything goes as planned. So we'll see, but who knows? But the 16 episodes will focus broadly talking about how I DM and my advice to new-ish DMs who come to this land. I mainly love the story aspect of GMing, so I love creating comprehensive, very detailed, complex stories. So that this guide will mostly focus on, that sort of nature. But worry not, I have a handy-dandy combat manual that will be included with the $200 full price of this series coming to you 2027. My goal at the end of the series is that you will have the knowledge to be able to write and run your own game and make your own guide, criticizing me, adding your own things about how you like DMing or how you feel like I'm a fucking stupid idiot. I'll watch it, fucking send it to me. We'll have a intellectual discussion that fucking Aristotle and Socrates would rival over a role-playing game. I would also say this guide is for people who know the absolute basics about D&D. I'm not going to go into detail about how to play, how to make characters, anything like that. There's plenty of fucking guides you can find on, how to play D&D. This is more, imagine you're in college, there's D&D 100, and then there's DMing 220. That's who this is for. I mean, I'm not going to go that complex. It's probably DMing 180. Honestly, but it's going to be detailed for you to do things and have fun. Woo. But for this guide, I do recommend the absolute basics knowledge of D&D and the idea that you want to DM. When you first start the process of DMing, whether it's because you're creative or your friends forced it on you, it's daunting and maybe even a little nerve-wracking to say the least. You want to give your friends a good experience, and that's all on you. The players aren't the ones writing and making sure the game is fun. It's on you, and if the game isn't fun, that's going to fall back on you, and that's a little scary. However, if you take it step by step, it makes it a lot less scary, and you can figure out how exactly you want to go about running the game overall. It's really a mental game of not trying to overthink anything. At the end of the day, the game's the game, you're going to play it, and then you'll go from there. And once you stop overthinking, it becomes a lot simpler to digest. It's like you have this big stick, and you're cutting it up and going. When you first start to consider DMing, you really want to think, what exactly do I want to do? This guide is going to focus on homebrewing and making your own story and doing stuff like that. But no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a module. That could be a great way of starting the DM, because it provides everything for you, and you could still run the game however you want. It's like a helping hand. As I said though, this guide will be for making your own world and really getting deep into homebrewing and making your own stuff. If you really love writing and being a storyteller, creating your own stories, this is a guide made for you, because that's what I am. When you start the process of coming up with an idea, you're going to ask yourself, how? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? You don't want to be that broad. It's completely overwhelming, and it could scare the heebie-jeebies out of you, So my advice is first start small. Ask yourself very specific questions and build from there. Think, what do I want to do? What do my players want to do? What type of world do I want to make? Stuff like that. Go into that detail, and then from there, start writing, and your story will just come together. Ask yourself a bunch of questions and just choose an answer. Don't get hung up on small little things. Just choose one and go. It's probably the best. If your gut says it's the best, it's the best. I guarantee you. One of the absolute first questions you should ask yourself is, what do I want to run? Do you want to run a fantasy game with kings, knights, and dragons, with epic sword fights for the century, with the Lich King sending his armies of fucking gremlins at your players? Or maybe you want to be a swashbuckler DM and you want your players to swing ship from ship as they fight and they shoot their flintlocks. only limit is your imagination, and do whatever you feels best. If you have an idea and you think it's cool, write it. See what happens, you know? It could be interesting. Anything could be interesting. As a starting DM, I recommend doing a medieval fantasy, especially with the D&D confines, because you don't need to homebrew as much when it comes to the rules of the game. But I would also say don't be afraid to expand out to other role-playing games. I'm a huge fan of Savage Worlds because I think it gives a little bit more freedom. But it's up to you. You could have a completely different, you could fucking hate Savage Worlds and think D&D's the best. That's all cool. Just don't be afraid to expand out. Don't be afraid to write something that isn't medieval fantasy either. Anything could work. A big pet peeve of mine is when I say, hey, wouldn't a pirate game be cool? And then someone says, well, it's a little too small in scope. How are you gonna write a big, broad campaign? And this fear maybe can be justified if the only DM they've played with is a new one who tries really, really hard and ends up being very, very limited in what they do with their big creative mind. A pirate game is only too small in scope if it is only a pirate game. If the story is pirate, if the weapons are pirate, if the characters are all pirates, if everything is pirate, you're doomed for failure because you're confining what you really can write. If everything must be pirates, there's only a finite thing of pirates, and eventually you're going to run out of material to use to write unique and creative stories. However, if your backdrop is pirate and you write from there, it can be an absolutely amazing story. The world opens and your creativity becomes the only limit to really do things in. If your story takes place in a pirate world, instead of being written by a pirate world, the game frees up immensely and you can do so much more compared to if you confine yourself to just everything pirates. This goes for any genre overall. I'm currently running a Wild West game called Atonement, and we haven't really had the problem of being too confined into a Wild West world, because it's a story that takes place in a Wild West world, and multiple things can happen within that Wild West world that can branch off that don't have to be only Wild West. It has the backdrop, but that doesn't mean everything is Wild West. I am not confined to a Western story, just a general Western world. And those are huge differences to make sure are separated. Be confined to your world, not to your story. If you have the backdrop mindset for any genre, things become much more fluid, and you can do whatever the fuck you want. And the end point is, anything can be a long, amazing game. Once you have your world idea, well, by golly, you should build it. I like to use Wonderdraft because its features are mind-boggling and it's just an amazing software, and I cannot recommend it enough for world building because of how simple it is and how easy it is to make a really nice looking map. However, if you don't have the money, pen, paper, and some elbow grease is all God really intended for us when he decided we should make maps. Making a map will make your world much more fluid and make it feel much more alive, as long as it gives the players some information of where they're going. It just makes the game a lot more fun. And it doesn't need to be a good map either, just you can throw some dice on a piece of paper and trace it. I've seen that's how some people do maps, and that's a perfectly fine way to do it. Also, have some basic lore and history down for your world. This doesn't have to be anything crazy, but again, it gives your world some life and some backstory to what makes your world your world. Also, don't be afraid to take from your favorite media, books, comics, whatever the fuck you're doing nowadays. Just take it and use it. I used to be super scared that everything I had to do had to be original or my players would make fun of me for it. Embrace that shit. If they're making fun of you, laugh along with them. You know, it doesn't matter. You're all here for a good time, and if you're taking influence, that's fine. The best thing about it is that you can't be struck down for plagiarism because it's not being published. While your world should follow your creative vision, you should never try to limit your players. If you make a human-only world and your player wants to be a dwarf, well, it really sucks for that player now because you are telling them what they can and can't do, and D&D isn't really that. It's to allow your players to, be free, be able to do what they want to do. That is the illusion of the game. Try to stay open on the haves and have-nots of the game. If you really do want to have a have-not, compromise with your player. Don't be so rigid in what you want to do. Telling players what to do and having limitations on what they can and can't do is a very fast way to having a very unpopular game. Compromise is the biggest word I can say here. Really meet halfway with your players and do your best to make sure they feel included and they have an active part in this world. If you make a pirate world and your player wants to be an awesome samurai Goliath, let them. Who cares? If they are going to make an epic samurai Goliath, just make sure they have a story that tells why they're in Dead Man Tell No Tells Yo Ho Pirate's Life for Me Pirate World.
Pirate's life for me. We extort, we pilfer, we filch and sack, drink up, be hearty.
Now that you have somewhat of a draft done for your world, we're going to move on to story, which is something we're going to focus on a lot going forward. But for the purposes of this, just figure out what you want your players to experience and what you really want to get deep in writing. Again, your imagination is the limit here, and it all comes down to what you want to write. The most important aspect of your story is your villain, which is something we're going to get into a lot deeper next episode. For now, we're just going to do a basic general outline for what you want to do and what your players are going to experience. Let's say you're going to do a pirate game, and any good game needs a good cataclysmic event to get your players on board to follow the plot. Maybe for this, let's say Captain McMoneybags, the biggest, baddest pirate to ever exist, is killed. He's completely lost at sea, and no one's seen him in weeks, making a huge power gap within the oceans. This is an amazing cataclysmic event because it does two things. One, it gives a mystery of what happened to McMoneybags, and two, it makes a huge power gap so anything is possible. Both of these should be heavily incorporated into your plot. The mystery of McMoneybags could lead into the big story overall, but the giant power vacuum could lead to a bunch of awesome pirate stories that, can drive the plot forward until you're ready to get really deep into the main plot. Maybe McMoneybags went and explored somewhere he shouldn't have looked for a forbidden treasure, and now the gods are angry. Maybe someone hated McMoneybags and hates pirates in general, and wants to restore order to the sea, cleansing all the filth from it. But you can get to all of that later on as your players first become epic, well-known pirates before they're incorporated into the main story. It could just be a backdrop to what's happening at the current moment. This is a great and awesome start to your story, and if you add a little seasoning that is known as player backstory, can easily become a 10 out of 10 that your players will talk about forever. Another example from, let's say, medieval fantasy could be undead attacks happening through cities. Zombies and skeletons rising from the ground and eating or taking people to somewhere completely unknown. And it can start your story really quickly and get your players right in the action. Let's say they're all meeting at a tavern and then boom, there's an attack as skeletons and zombies knock down the doors, and now they're forced into combat, making them need to follow the leading them to follow the breadcrumb trail that takes them to the necromancer or whatever. This is a very basic plotline, but it's 100% open to who you want to make the bad guys and the necromancers, what you want their overarching plot to be. And depending on your creativity, it can be literally anything at all. One key element I think you should have in all your storylines is one of mystery. Who killed McMoneybags? What are the necromancers really after? This allows your players to get very interested in the story and really dive deep into that mystery and make up a bunch of assumptions. This is something we'll dive into a lot deeper as we get into next episode talking about villains, but overall, all you need to know now is it allows the players to get really deep into your story and be hooked by this mystery as they discuss what's what. Another thing to consider is whether you want your game to be completely open world or linear. It sounds like a very small thing, but it can completely lead to how you orchestrate your story and how you want your story to be. You could have it be an open world where there's a bunch of side quests they have to follow, or they can just continue to follow the main plot. Or you can have it be linear, where the main plot is basically all they're following, with maybe a couple of small things that diverge from the plot every once in a while. Either of these work absolutely fine, and I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I would just consider the writing you'll have to do for both of them. Open world is going to be a lot more writing, as you're writing a bunch of extra side quests and a bunch of extra places for them to go, and sometimes that might feel meaningless as they don't have to do anything with the main plot. However, it makes the world feel much more alive, as they can just go do any of these extra side quests that you give them at any time. While a linear game is much less writing, and it maybe makes the plot feel a bit more straightforward as they're only following this one thing overall. But if you're not careful, it can make the world feel very single-focused, and that the only thing that really happens to the world is what happens with the players, and there's no in-between. You just really want to make sure the world feels alive, and the open world is great at this, but again, it's a lot more writing. And a linear story can also feel alive if you make sure there are extra events that are talked about that have to do without the players. My current game is a linear one where my players are going boss to boss as they continue to pick up the breadcrumbs of the story as they try to figure out the overarching mystery of it all. But I do kind of wish I had a singular city focused game where they could go back to this one area and have homes to go back to instead of being nomads wandering. Just know what you're getting into beforehand, and know you're probably going to want to do one or the other at some point. Long story short, do what's best for you. Maybe they are in a city to start off and they can do whatever they want when it comes to the side quest, but as soon as they start that story pattern, they're on it for a couple sessions, maybe 3 or 4, before they get back to the open world. That's 100% fine and can work absolutely amazingly. A linear and open world work amazingly on their own. They just both come with their own unique pros and cons. All in all, hopefully this has helped you make a very basic outline of your plot. Maybe you've written some of the things down. Maybe it's all mental. Maybe it's all in your notes app and it's just cool god names. It doesn't matter. Whatever works best for you, as long as you have a basic idea of how you want to write your story now. No matter what you do, you need a rough sketch in your mind before you can really start going deep in what you want to do. Along with this, if you're not getting a basic idea, that's totally fine. Never try to force anything. All my ideas just kind of come to me out of nowhere. I'll be a fucking nerd listening to history podcasts, and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. That's a cool part of history. Why can't I make it a cool part of my game? And you want to make sure you really like your idea, because D&D is a huge commitment, and it can take years to finish a session because players have other things going on. Just know you might not play every week, and if there are some breaks, you want to be able to get right back into it. Just make sure you really love your idea before you really start writing it, and never force it. Don't be mad at yourself if you're not able to formulate an idea right away. Creativity isn't a switch that can just be flipped on and off at will, and sometimes it takes a while to get a really good idea. Just think what interests you and what you would like to, continue and have a collaborative story. And if you're really not able to come up with anything, written modules work just fine. Overall, just know no matter what your idea is, whether it's grand and spans multiple continents or it's small and takes place in one city, everything can work just fine, and it's kick-ass because I know it's kick-ass, and you're awesome. You're the greatest. I know it. I've read your stuff. At the end of the day, we're all here just to have a good time, and no one expects George Martin to be at the DM table making this amazing 3 million page backstory to a single city. It's D&D. We're just all here to have a good time, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just know girls, they just want to have fun. Anywho, enjoy the rest of your day, and hope it's grand. Hope you had a good breakfast, lunch, dinner, fucking brunch. I don't care. Hope your snack was a good zebra cake. If you're a viewer that has been waiting a long time for me to make a new video, thank you for your patience. I'm gonna be real with you. I'm just kind of lazy. I could have made multiple videos by now, but you know, you know me. Anyway, make sure to check out my socials. Yeah, and have a good one.